United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Begin the meeting with a moment of silence. This meeting is being recorded and televised by the local cable company. I'd like a motion to approve bill and payroll warrants.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'd like a motion to accept correspondence in the read file.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Public forum. Now is the time for someone to speak on a matter that's not on the agenda.
Carl, while we're in public forum,
Yeah.
the folks from our cable access studio mentioned this afternoon, just a little while ago, that they would like to host a candidates night for the selectmen's election in this room on Tuesday, April 23rd from 5 to 6:30. Assuming the board has no objection to making the room available, I'll make the arrangements.
Is that like a debate?
Or format, yes.
Similar to a debate? Okay. But you want to have it here?
We can broadcast from this room as we go down.
Anyone have any objections to that?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Well, that will, yeah, actually, that makes some old business, it helps make it sense. We had announced meeting dates before. We've amended the meeting dates for April to having a meeting on April 9th. That's our meeting with, a joint meeting with the Finance Committee. And we'll also be visited by the Superintendent of Whitman Hanson. And also, the next meeting will be on May 30th. I'm sorry, April 30th. So the meetings in April will be the 9th and the 30th. And leaves the room free on the 23rd.
And we're doing it in conjunction with the Express.
With the Whitman Hanson Express? Very good. Okay, no objections, then, yeah, feel free, Kevin. I'd like a motion to approve the meeting minutes of open session on February 26th.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor?
I abstain.
I'd like the motion to accept the minutes of the open session March 20th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
First item, business is the public meeting with respect to the application of Forever Healthy, Zilma Arroyo, for a common vittler's license on the premises located at 571 Temple Street, subject to the receipt of the license fee.
So moved.
On our agenda, it says copy of the lease agreement, but that has been received.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
She
Are you Zilma?
Yes.
Would you like to say something about your business? Use the microphone, please.
Good night, everyone. Do you want me to say something about my business?
Sure.
It's a small business. It's a nutrition club. In my place, you can go and have healthy shakes and meal replacements. I help people to have a healthy lifestyle. I do free wellness evaluation. People can check their weight, the body fat percentage, body muscles, and I help people to put together this idea on healthy plans, like what you should eat, what you should not eat, how many calories, the importance of have a healthy lifestyle. I know so many people are suffering for obesity and different disease, and I feel like my small place is a place where people are welcome to start a healthy lifestyle.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye. Aye. Welcome.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Act on the request of Michael Ganchard on behalf of Dollars for Scholars to declare the month of April as Dollars for Scholars Month.
So moved.
Is there a second? And that's why we have this a bunch of whereases, I guess. Whereas, I'll read it and then we can vote on it. Whereas Whitman and Hanson Dollars for Scholars has been awarding scholarships to deserving students from Whitman and Hanson for 56 years. And whereas Whitman and Hanson Dollars for Scholars has awarded $2.5 million to over 3,400 students. And whereas Whitman and Hanson Dollars for Scholars is a community-based nonprofit organization which receives support from residents, businesses, and community organizations. And whereas Whitman and Hanson Dollars for Scholars offers non-restricted scholarships open to qualified secondary school graduates from both private and public schools living in the towns of Whitman and Hanson. And whereas Dollars for Scholars is currently appealing to Whitman and Hanson residents through their annual fundraising campaign. Now, therefore, we Board of Selectmen for the town of Whitman hereby proclaim the month of April as Dollars for Scholars Month and urge all residents and businesses to recognize and support Whitman and Hanson Dollars for Scholars in the work that they do.
Very
Is there a
good.
motion to
So moved.
post that?
Second.
Any discussion?
Great
All those in
job.
favor?
Aye.
Michael, have you been involved with it for all those 56 years?
No.
I think so.
It just feels it.
Okay, that's good. April is now Dollars for Scholars Month. Now, the next item on the agenda is to act on the request of Michael Ganchard on behalf of Dollars for Scholars to erect a fundraising thermometer on the Town Hall lawn from the beginning of April through the end of May.
So moved.
Is there a second? It would be pointless to vote this one down.
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Great job.
You're done. Unless you want to hang out. Okay.
Been here all day.
Next item on the agenda is to act on license renewals for the following license holders for the period May 1st, 2019 through April 30th, 2020, subject to the submission of renewal paperwork, renewal fees, and current tax status. And the categories are fuel storage licenses, junk collectors licenses, and junk dealers licenses.
So moved.
Second.
Anyone have any questions about any of those? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Old business. Business Board of Selectmen Handbook. You have in your packet the draft of the Board of Selectmen Handbook. Trust you've looked at it. Does anyone want to make a motion to accept it?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, any revisions? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
And thank you, Lisa, for putting that together. Announce the amended, we did that.
Yeah.
Announce the amended meeting dates 4/9 and 4/30/19. And so now I'm going to turn the evening over to Frank to guide us through some budget talk. Thank you.
Over the last week, I've been working on a number of scenarios, taking different budget approaches with cuts identified by departments and reductions identified by the size of the budget and the ability to withstand the cuts. I met with the Finance Committee last Tuesday, and they requested to change the budget proposed, or the budget recommended, for the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District to 4%. I started working on that. I asked the town accountant the next morning to complete the exercise and send it out. I actually sent those to you last night because Carl had requested a copy of it. Today, I met with the department managers of the town. Schools were not present at this meeting. At the request of the department heads, I asked Carl Kowalski and Dan Salvucci to attend to give their individual inputs on some of the recommendations and suggestions. And what you have in front of you is a budget worksheet that was developed by the collective effort of the various departments within the town. Again, not Whitman Hanson, since we'd already received their request. And the results that they came up with, and I saw this for the first time this afternoon, were very close to the scenario I was working on yesterday and talked to Carl about. And their recommendation is based on their belief that the likelihood of getting both a override and a debt exclusion did not hold a lot of hope. Based on discussions I've had with people, I tend to agree that their summation is probably more on point than not. So taking these numbers, and again, these numbers were roughly $90,000 less than the number I was working with. I took the bottom line budget for this Article 2, which is $32,888,556. I added to that the payment obligations that we are obligated to make based on prior commitment. And the total comes up to $34,280,000. Our estimated available levy is $33,972,338, leaving a small shortfall. Then utilizing, in this proposal, free cash to fund those capital articles, or most of those capital articles, we are left with a net available cash position of $583,000. Now, the problem with that, if you refer to the draft warrant, and particularly to page 6, the first 29 articles in this draft warrant are articles that can be funded both through the levy as identified in those must-haves and through other revenue sources, which include the ambulance fund, police fine account, and the Chapter 90 money, as well as the Sewer and Water Enterprise Fund, also the Title V revenue account that pays for the loans that we have issued under Title V repairs. So if you go to page 9, the summary is in Articles 4 through 10, we have to raise and appropriate $545,120. Chapter 90 costs are $388,036. Title V payments are $7,352. Appropriation from cemetery funds is $8,300. The ambulance fund subsidy to Article 2 to fund parts of the budget for the Whitman Fire Department is $456,402. Motor vehicle fines contributes $29,664. And water and sewer enterprise articles, for those identified with appropriations, are $918,100. Articles 30 through the end, I have 46, but I think that may include non-money, yeah. Is an additional $973,000 $947. If this proposed budget were adopted, and if we took no other action to increase our revenue, we would not have enough money to fund those additional articles. The issue here is one of sustainability. We need to reach a point where we can fund and continue to fund the ongoing operations of the town. The reason I stopped at the 583 is I don't think it would make sense to vote a budget that leaves us no available funds for any other issues. If we were to adopt this budget action, it would have to be with the effort to get the current bond debt approved as a debt exclusion. The combination of those available funds and the debt exclusion frees up $1 million. When we took on that bond, the town made a decision to pay for it through free cash. And while it's worked for us, it's hampered our ability to do ongoing things. I spoke with the folks at the Collins Center on Friday. I should have a first draft for the capital plan by the end of April. I expect to have a finalized plan after everyone's reviewed it. We've had our input and they've made whatever adjustments need to be made by late summer. If we believe that an override would fail, this would make the most sense to get things back on track. Now, the casualty in this budget, if you want to call it that, is the request for Whitman Hanson versus what we proposed to fund. But in this scenario, every other department goes back to 2019 and subtracts from it rather than adding to it. Of all the options we've looked at, this is the one I'd like to bring to the Finance Committee. But the reason we're here tonight is to talk about the various options that have been worked over the last month or so.
Discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to say, when we had our meeting this afternoon, it was really nice that all the departments came together and looked at their budgets and was able to make decisions on where they could make cuts so that we'll maintain the status of the department as far as employment and to honor contractual raises. I think they did a great job in coming together as town employees, working for the town and doing a job that was really good. I mean, it'd be kind of difficult, I think. I mean, I could look at their budget and make cut here and cut there, but I'm not really with their budget. I don't work for any of the departments, so they know exactly where budgets should be cut that will not affect the operation or as little effect on their operation as possible. And I think they all did a great job today.
Yeah, what I was pleased with at the meeting, I was anxious about going to a meeting. It was called by all the department heads. And I think they asked a meeting that was a result of a meeting they had last week, apparently, to which they did not invite Frank. But and they invited Dan and I to go to this meeting. They couldn't invite 3 selectmen, otherwise it would be a meeting that had to be posted. But I think they were inviting a pro-school person and a person who was a pro-town person, and so it kind of balanced it off. I won't tell you which was which.
I'll tell.
Yeah. But what pleased me about the meeting was that, in working with Frank over the last week about different scenarios, one of his scenarios looked almost exactly like what the department heads came up with.
Except I was still going for the override.
Basically the same.
Well, at the time, we had decisions to make about overrides and debt exclusions. The meeting started. I know in my head I was thinking of a debt exclusion and an override, get us through this thing altogether. It became quickly apparent that either a debt exclusion or an override would be the one that would be the scenario that has the most likelihood of success. And I think I've come around to that. This is a decision we'll have to make next week probably, because it'll have to go on the ballot. To put a debt exclusion on the ballot, deal with the capital shortfall once we get together with the Collins Group and figure that whole business out. But what I liked about the meeting was the fact that there was some agreement, although coming, two groups of people by themselves coming up with a solution that was similar, and it was a solution that does mean that every department accepts the responsibility for wage increases by having to cut in other areas in the department, but it's a decision that those decisions those department heads made, and it also means that no people are leaving. People are receiving raises, no people are leaving. But some cuts made in the departments. I don't know how to express this. It's not an elephant in the room anymore, but it's as far as the schools are concerned, that presents a whole different scenario. We're offering the schools only a 4% increase over last year, which is about $500,000. Other departments are getting cut. The schools are getting $500,000 more than they had last year. It's not what they say they need. They say they need a lot. They say they need a lot more than that. But at this stage of the game, there's nothing that we can do as a town to satisfy. I can't see it, to satisfy their needs. Some people talked at the meeting about, well, why don't we just do an override just for the schools, and cover all of their expenses. I didn't like that for a couple of reasons. I didn't like it because it looks like the town and the schools are two separate entities, and they're really not. They're really not. They're one entity. And the other was if a large override were to fail, then would all be up the creek. This seemed to be a way to start, as Frank put it, to start to build some sort of sustainability, and the schools are going to have to figure out on their own what they can do with a 4% raise. Maybe they have to look at their budget again and see if there are places where it can be cut and their people can receive raises and not lose people and all of that. I don't know if that works for them, but they have to try. It sounds like Hanson is not going to give them the 10% or the 15% that they asked for. So they're going to have to come back to both towns with a new budget anyway. And we'll have to see what happens when that happens. See what they come up with. That leaves it out there. But it leaves our town departments whole, and it gives us a way to start making some money that will, the debt exclusion does, that will get us to some sort of sustainability track as we go on. I didn't mean to talk that much.
I have a question.
Brian.
If that debt exclusion passes, is there some way to earmark some of that for capital stabilization?
Well, in the scenario I've laid out, if you go to page 6 of the warrant, starting with Article 30, all of that and the subsequent articles all require capital expenditures. The pivotal question here is whether we will get a successful vote on the debt exclusion, because if we do, that frees up $1.1 million in cash for capital. It would be my suggestion that if that's the course we take, and the board votes next week to call for a debt exclusion, that I would suggest at our annual town meeting, we stop at Article 29 and adjourn the meeting to a future date after the election, so we know whether we have the money to appropriate for all these capital requests, or to determine which ones to support. If it fails, then we really have to pick and choose what's essential within these numbers.
But everything up to Article 30 is taken care of.
Yes.
You know, and Frank, another good thing is some of the capital items that were on the department heads took off, realized that they took them off themselves. They said, no, let's take this off, let's take that off, saving money. They did their job. They did a good job. And I think it will work. I think we need to get out there and tell the residents exactly how important to vote for that debt exclusion, so that we can free up capital and use that for one-time expenses on some of these capital items. You know, prioritize them. And that way, you know, I mean, we'll be taking care of town business. I think they did a good job.
We're not out of the woods,
No.
Not even close.
but but it's a step.
If we can do this and build a plan that enables us to come back in a future meeting to
Right.
ask for more funding.
Right. Are you looking
And
for?
whatever money isn't spent needs to.
Are you looking for
capital
support for the plan that you outlined from the board before you go to the finance committee? Well, we're meeting with them jointly next week,
Right.
so we'll roll it out with them next week.
Yeah, but they should have a chance to go through it.
Yes?
Question. You said that the 5-year capital plan should be ready for publication sometime at the end of the summer.
I think Frank said that, based upon his discussions with the council.
Is there a timeline on the financial policy or on the strategic plan?
I'm sorry?
The financial policy you guys have been working on in October with,
The financial policy is part of that process.
yeah. It had gone through couple revisions, and I thought it was getting ready for publication or to be shared or accepted or discussed.
Is that the committee that Scott was?
Yeah,
Was in
but
charge?
we've incorporated that into the budget policy process that they're developing with this grant.
With the strategic plan, is there a timeline on the strategic plan?
I do not, we have not addressed forming a strategic plan. Part of the purpose of the survey was to collect information and to get some idea of how people felt about certain things. We should start a strategic plan. That's going to take some time and some support, whether we get it through the DLS or we engage someone to come and assist us. It's an involved process. It's going to take probably, well, the last school one took about 2.5 months. Well, it should be a little less time than that.
Well, one of the things I want to bring up is if the strategic plan is on the operating side of the budget, the capital plan is obviously on the capital side, the financial policy helps guide your spending and borrowing practices. Those three are critical for the financial forecast that you need, which, according to the Finance Committee handbook, it says it's a critical first step in a budget process. And the budget process the first step of the budget process for fiscal year 2021 is just around the corner. So one of my major concerns is that without having these things in place really soon, we won't be able to, this summer and early fall, make realistic predictions about, what we need for the budget for the 2021 budget, never mind the 2020 budget. So I feel like this stuff is really important and becoming, timelines are really urgent. I think having them implemented sooner rather than later would be very helpful for people at home to decide whether or not an override, or for you even, to decide whether or not an override would be appropriate or a debt exclusion, if that's your consideration. But to make those decisions without that information is really difficult, and in many ways kind of unfair. I think there are many reasons why those things potentially couldn't happen. I think coming up with like a really strong reason why they should, and making them happen sooner rather than later is really be beneficial for the community. So I urge you to do so, please.
I think it would be beneficial for the community is to have listened to everything that's been said over the past year about the budget shortfall that we have and the position that we're in now, and that we're going to need some contribution from the taxpayers to help get us through it. And one of the possible ways of doing that is a straight Proposition 2.5 override that lasts forever. The other is a debt exclusion. And I think the thinking now is to do that first. I think what the town needs to know about that is town needs the money. It needs the money. It's clear to anyone with half a brain that the town needs the money in order to continue the level of services it's been it has enjoyed. So I hope people get behind whatever override strategy that arises from over the next week, whether it's a debt exclusion, whether it's an override, whether it's both of them. But I think we're leaning towards a debt exclusion right now, and it's important for the citizens to get behind that if they want to continue to live in the town that they've been living in.
Yeah. I mean,
and to suggest that somehow they don't have the information to make that decision is off the wall to me. It's clear that they need that information. It's clear they have that information.
Honestly, when I cross-checked that with the research, the Finance Committee handbook, and with the Board of Selectmen handbook, it says clearly that there should be a 5-year capital plan that citizens can look at. That's not debatable. It says that in the manual. Having a strategic plan, especially during a crisis, is a critical, formal piece of information that people can consider and see that the decisions that you're making is in line with what's been stated in the strategic plan. To have this, stuff going back and forth and behind closed doors meetings driving many of these decisions is, for somebody who's trying to pay attention, is confusing.
What behind closed doors meeting are you talking about?
There was a meeting today, behind closed doors, right?
Meeting with the department heads?
Sure, where critical information about the budget has been determined. Yes?
No, it's not critical information about the budget that was determined at that meeting. It was a strategy to try to deal with the budget shortfall. A strategy that was developed by people who are paid by the town to manage the funds.
Sure. But I think in the best case scenario, or even in just a logical scenario,
meeting is an insult.
An explicit,
it's not necessary.
No, an explicit plan is helpful for people to see how the budget is going to be harmonized or in sync with the explicit plan.
To put it another way, the closed doors meeting that we had at from 2 o'clock to about 4:30 has been fully vetted, or has been fully explained in an open meeting. In an open meeting right now.
Sure. It has. However, having the thorough information in a strategic plan...
I'm not going to continue debating with you. I think I've heard about enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can't wait to see Facebook.
I would like to add that we had these discussions about an informational pre-town meeting, and I think that it would be nice if we could set and commit a certain date for that, so we could present all we have to the town before it happens, so everybody's as educated as possible. I think we were all pretty much in an agreement that that kind of a meeting can help, and the more information, the better.
Got any ideas on that one, Frank?
Well, I suggest we coordinate that with the Finance Committee. I'll mention it to them tonight.
We'll talk about it
But
next
I
week.
would think that probably next Saturday, following Saturday, after the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee have met and presumably agreed on an approach, would be most helpful.
Well, if that date works with everybody else, that's fine. It won't work for me. I won't be in the Commonwealth on that day. Does anyone want to do anything else? We've given, is there a consensus, at least amongst the board, that this is the way we're going?
I think that if we were to have a town meeting like Brian suggests, we'll explain what we're doing. But I think anybody who attends, if they listen to us and see that we're putting together a budget that does not cut services in the town.
But does cut 40 teachers.
So, let me finish, please. All right, let me say, 30 years of doing budgets for my company and all the years doing budgets here, the easiest thing to do when you want to cut a budget is lay off people. Simple, very simple. That's the easiest thing to do. That way it's simple, you know, you just cut it out.
I'm just going
But
off the
department
impact statement there.
But the department heads today showed us there's another way other than cutting staff.
Right. However, you've sacrificed capital money. And now you've put capital on limbo.
Not all capital,
So,
just
I mean,
the necessary capital.
Although I agree with a good chunk of this, there is a lot being risked here.
What's at risk?
Almost $1 million of capital requests.
It depends upon some sort
Right.
of an override
Right.
being successful.
Right, but it depends on the capital items that
And
are actually, are they really needed? Or are they wants or needs? That's the decision taxpayers have to make.
I don't view it as this great success, I'll tell you that.
What capital items that we cannot use? do?
I mean, I guess my questions will come out next week when Mr. Simonak's in the room, and hopefully he has something prepared.
Yeah,
Or,
he's here for a specific reason, though, Randy, next week. The reason why he's coming in next week is because he wants to ask the town, the Board of Selectmen, to sign off on a, what do you call it?
SOI, Statement of Interest.
Statement of interest for a new middle school 5 years down the road. That's all he's coming in to do, so that we can start, get in line for that.
we wouldn't give him any time to speak on his budget while he's here, or?
Well,
We probably wouldn't be prepared.
yeah, we could, but no,
Right.
I'm not saying we shouldn't, except,
Well, I think you have your vote, so.
no,
voted.
they made a request. Right now, we're sort of batting that request back with a lower figure. I'd be glad to hear what he has to say if it's fair to him to try to respond to that next week. I mean, he has an organization and a school committee that's going to have to respond to probably both Hanson's and Whitman's giving him less than he believes he needs.
Right, and we also know that Hanson has committed 6.5.
That's what I hear.
Well,
but
I know for a fact.
Okay.
I think Mr. Lynham knows for a fact they did that,
yeah, I heard.
because he was in that meeting.
No, I heard another. There was another statement floating around that Hanson was going to give them 10%.
No,
But
6.5.
that's not happening. So they're not going to. They're going to have to come back with a different budget proposal, and he knows that. he's probably not going to be.
Although this is better than, obviously, last night's article too, at 8:30 at night.
That was the Finance Committee's article, too.
That was last week.
Well, they haven't even seen this, so I don't know who I don't know who made this,
Well,
but,
wait a minute, they did.
no, they didn't.
Oh, sure they did.
Who?
This was distributed to...
Lisa, do you want to go get the Selectmen's liaison from the Finance Committee, please?
I'm not sure what we're talking about.
Well, we have an Article 2 coming out every other week. And this came out at 8:30 last night. And this wasn't prepared by the Finance Committee. I don't know who this was prepared by.
Can I see that for a second? Because I'm not sure.
The Finance Committee hasn't prepared any of the budgets. What we've done is we've sat there.
Oh, okay, so now they didn't prepare any.
Let me finish.
Is this what was sent last night? I thought this was the Finance Committee's.
It is.
This is
The
the
Finance Committee
Finance Committee's
last
report.
week voted to set the school budget at 4% and to reset the other numbers. They asked me to do that Tuesday night. Wednesday, I gave it to Ken and said, would you please enter these numbers and send it out to the Finance Committee? And it was sent out to the Finance Committee.
Has the Finance Committee voted on this Article 2? If you haven't seen it, it came out last week.
Well, all they voted on was the schools and the changed numbers.
We've made no vote to recommend. We've made a vote to discuss, and that is it. So any comment on whether or not the Finance Committee has made any vote to recommend is completely false.
Has anyone here said the Finance Committee has voted to recommend the budget?
Have you voted to recommend a number for the school district?
No.
Excuse me. Did you vote last Tuesday to set the school number at 4%?
We voted to place a dollar value there in order to act as a placeholder to deal with the budget as a whole. But we did not vote any percentage assessment increase or decrease for that matter.
What was the dollar value?
I don't have it.
4%. That's what the chairman introduced, and that's what the committee voted to put into Article 2 for the schools, and then recalculate all of the other lines, which is what we did, which is what was sent out to you and your other members Wednesday by the town accountant.
We did get a revised Article 2 from the town accountant. But again, the question to me was whether or not we voted on it.
Reflecting what you asked to be done Tuesday night, correct?
Reflecting that we put a placeholder
Put
there.
4% in the schools and recalculate the other lines.
Yes.
Thank you.
But there was also a discussion at that meeting of cuts to the fire at that point, which you guys didn't know the answer to, correct?
The fire department, during that meeting, you're asking me whether or not there was comments made in regard to the fire department?
Well, I just want to know how that document was completely created without the Finance Committee's. And this is why I don't think this budget document is a complete success, because there's another board, an appointed board in the other room, working on a budget.
And we have a joint meeting with them next week.
So are we going to dissolve this? Should we dissolve the Finance Committee?
No.
Because if this is what we're adopting,
This is the direction in which some of us would like to go. But we're having a joint meeting with the Finance Committee next week to talk about everything.
In answer to your question, Randy, that document reflects what the Finance Committee requested be done last Tuesday, which was to reduce the school amount to 400...
that's not true.
Excuse me.
I watched the meeting, Frank. It was clearly stated as a placeholder so they could begin working. At no point did they vote to give the schools a 4% assessment.
And nobody's saying they voted to give them 4%. I don't know where you're getting that from. The budget isn't final. Nothing's been voted. No lines have been voted. The only vote taken was to put 4% into the school budget and calculate Article 2 with the resulting changes, which is what we did, which is what was sent to the Finance Committee the following day.
And that placeholder that the Finance Committee created actually became the placeholder for the meeting that we had today.
It did?
Because the town directors adopted that.
Well, if we want to go back to what Mr. Kane said, as far as transparency and openness, if I don't know what's going on, then how is the public? How does the public know what's going on? If I'm getting two budgets within a 16-hour period that are completely different, one where we're calling for over $1 million of cuts in public safety, to the very next day, now we're not cutting public safety at all. As a matter of fact, we're increasing budgets. I mean, how does anyone, and this goes back to what Brian said, where we definitely need some type of meeting, because this is convoluted, it is not clear, and why I say we're possibly sacrificing capital now is how does anyone know what they're voting on?
Well, hopefully,
This has not been a clear process at all, from start to finish.
well, we'll see if we can get some more clarity next week. As far as the transparency in the public, the public doesn't get the budget put together in real time for them. It's a process that takes a number of people, a number of days, a number of weeks to come up with a final conclusion. And once it comes up with that conclusion, it tries to sell it to the public.
Well,
That's transparency. Transparency is how much are you making, how much is that person making, what is happening to this department. Nobody's hiding anything from the public.
Well, I think we have different ideas of what transparency in the process is.
Yeah, we probably do.
And for me, if we're going to go for a debt exclusion, then an absolute policy should be written that our free cash going forward will be reserved for capital funds.
Why would you want
Because
to?
why would you get into the same situation again? Are you going to now start writing the capital, your free cash into the budget? And I think Mr. Bazanton has the same concern I do, that you now take this out of seek a debt exclusion and then use this money up. So before I would even vote on that, I would want a policy written by this board that free cash or a percentage will be guaranteed going to capital spending. And that's how we will develop a capital plan.
That's why we have a capital stabilization. That goes to capital. Free cash is exactly what it is, free cash that comes and goes. Your stabilization is for emergencies, your capital stabilization.
Has just paid the police debt the last 10 years.
Right,
Because the town made that decision.
right. It was their
This
decision.
board didn't make that
Well,
decision.
what I'm saying is that if we're going to pull this out, then I want it for a purpose.
And
A
absolutely
sole
it should
purpose
be.
that it will now go to give something back to the taxpayers.
Free cash should go to wherever the taxpayers want it
No,
to go.
we have been talking about using free cash to support capital needs
Right.
Then a
and,
policy should be written
and
behind
to
that.
appropriate the remainder, most of the remainder, into the capital stabilization plan. We've been talking about that for 2 years.
Right, I really don't want to tie our hands on free cash and make a policy that it has to be used for a specific thing.
Well, I
That's
think-
what free cash is all about.
I think Randy has a good point. If we're going to do a debt exclusion in order to free up, no pun intended, the free cash, then we need to decide how and why. And if the purpose of freeing that money up is to place that debt in the levy and make that cash available, then we should be committing the vast majority of that money to capital. If we're not appropriating it at a meeting for a capital spending purpose, then it should be appropriated into capital stabilization. And then from that, we vote the articles. You probably should leave a nominal sum, maybe $100,000, in free cash, so that during the year, before we set the tax rate, if something occurs and we need to have a special meeting to do something, there's a revenue source to pay for it, or a cash account to pay for it. But I don't see any problem with the policy that says the intent of the town is to utilize free cash as a means of paying for our capital needs. Shouldn't be the only means. You know, once part of this challenge is how much we raise each year and where it goes. I mean, Sean talked earlier about projections. I've already shown you projections for 20 and 21. It's not a difficult process. The difficult process is controlling our expenses so that we're not spending all of that money. Or in the alternative, we need to go to the town and say we want to appropriate a sum of money to be dedicated to capital. And that's really what we're doing with the debt exclusion. But it isn't enough. We'll have to revisit it.
Why can't we do that at town meeting each year when we look at our capital needs and say, okay, we'll use free cash for this, or sometimes, no, we won't use free cash, and it's sitting there?
Because
why handcuff ourselves?
You know, I heard that argument in 1996 on this board when I tried to establish a capital stabilization account. Why do we want to tie our hands? It took 6 years to get that account created. The reason is to make a commitment to the process so people have a way of knowing that we are dedicating and committing to this course of action.
Then I suggest on free cash, if we want to use it for capital, we have an article to transfer X amount of dollars from free cash into the capital stabilization fund, and then we appropriate from the capital stabilization.
Well, that's what we would do, Dan, but I think you're missing the point.
But we're not earmarking free cash for strictly stabilization, capital.
The intent in doing what Randy's suggesting is to send a message to everybody that free cash isn't free. Am I correct? Is that what?
If you're taking the police station out of the levy, what benefit is it for the taxpayer if they have no guarantee that they're getting something back out of their money? And for me, giving something back to the taxpayer is in the way of capital projects.
Right.
So,
okay.
If I'm going to vote it, I want a policy.
I agree.
That
I agree. But all you need to do is put an article to transfer the money into capital stabilization and then draw capital out of that. Why strap yourself?
Until you need the money now for a year, you come up short. And we're just going to take a little bit of that capital money. It's exactly what you saw with the National Grid money, Dan. We weren't going to use it in the foundation budget, and all of a sudden we were just going to use that for capital. And slowly but surely over the last 4 and 5 years, we've written all that money into the budget. I want a secure capital plan. And that's the only way I'm voting it.
I can agree a capital plan, but I disagree on how free cash should be labeled.
So we just want a plan on paper, but we don't want to have any money to actually pay for it.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
But what I'm saying.
Then why label it free cash? Why is it called free cash?
It'll go into the capital fund.
Right, with an article.
Of course,
Okay,
after it goes into capital.
That ends the discussion. As long as you don't call free cash strictly capital monies.
For me, free cash should go into the capital stabilization fund.
Okay, that's all I'm saying. We're saying it two different ways.
Well, I think we should earmark a percentage.
Right.
And it should be
a high percentage.
Etched in stone, so whatever board comes along, they can't deviate. It should be a commitment that this board makes and the town makes to capital stabilization and improvements going forward. And there's no guarantee down the road that future boards will follow that unless we memorialize it.
We can't bind a future board, but we can set the course
Right.
for future process. You know, one of the things that does happen, and again, simply because revenue calculations are not, unfortunately, an exact science, we work with the numbers we have now. On July 1st, our contractor, Patriot Properties, goes out and starts looking at properties. They go and they value new properties built, they value additions, and they come back with a number that the assessor then enters into the system, and within a couple of weeks of setting our tax rate, comes up with an actual number for growth. That money is part of our cash that can be voted up to the day we set the tax rate. So last year, $330,000 in new growth that we didn't, or additional money that we didn't expect to see came in, and we could just as easily met in October and voted to appropriate that money to a stabilization source. It would have made it more difficult to do this budget because the cash wouldn't be available, but maybe that's what we need to do. The reason we stopped having special town meetings in the fall is it became a spending opportunity,
Right.
and that's not what we
Special
want.
things. Plus, we have a special town meeting that all monies come from free cash, right? Available
Well,
funds.
they come from available
Free
funds.
cash.
Special town meeting isn't going to be all
Right.
free cash. Most of it is going to be budget transfers.
Budget transfer, but some available funds, yeah.
And that's another reason why I think it should be earmarked for capital, so you don't get transfer requests. People coming up short, adding it to their lines. It should be for capital projects going forward. If for the last 10 years you made the payment for a capital project, why not keep it the same?
Well, one reason might be that those 40 teachers that you say are going to be laid off.
I'm just going by what the impact
No,
statement
but
is.
I'm just saying that all of this emphasis on earmarking things for capital resources is fine, except we also need operational cash at the same
Yep.
time. The schools need to be able to depend upon, if they can't depend upon what they ask for, they need to depend upon some sort of a clear revenue stream forecasted over the next number of years, a percentage of our new growth, for
Again,
example.
and that goes back to a policy.
Yeah,
If we're just going to start giving them arbitrary numbers, then let's make a policy that 75% of our new growth will be guaranteed to the school, and from that
Exactly.
point forward,
exactly. I just didn't want us to lose track of that.
you can produce a financial plan.
Right.
If they know what you're going to give them, they need to plan on it. If we know what we're going to give them, we can plan for our town departments.
Exactly. We exhausted this discussion? No more repeating? Okay. Motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.